Close your eyes and imagine stepping into a suburban kitchen in 1965. The Formica countertops gleam under the warm glow of a retro light fixture, a casserole dish bubbles in the oven, and the faint sound of a black and white TV carries through from the living room. The air smells like onions frying in butter, beef roasting low and slow, or perhaps tomato soup simmering on the stove. These were the meals that defined a generation, simple, hearty, comforting, and deeply familiar. They weren't about fine dining, they were about family, tradition, and togetherness. Every bite was a reminder of stability in a changing world. If you've ever longed to relive the meals of your childhood or want to rediscover the flavors that once united American families, this journey is for you. Stay with me as we explore the dishes that filled dinner tables in the 1960s, and maybe even inspired some of your own family traditions. The dinner table as a time machine. The 1960s were a decade of transformation. America saw the civil rights movement, the space race, and cultural revolutions that redefined music, fashion, and politics. But inside the home, one constant remained: dinner. At a time when convenience foods were exploding onto the market, and when families still prioritized eating together, meals became the heartbeat of domestic life. What people cooked reflected not just taste, but values, identity, and the rhythms of daily life. These were meals designed to be affordable, filling, and repeatable. They weren't exotic, but they were beloved. And for many Americans today, the memories of these meals are stronger than any photograph or song from that era. 1. Meatloaf Mondays. If there was ever a king of the 1960s dinner table, it was meatloaf. Every family had its own recipe, passed down or improvised, usually involving ground beef, breadcrumbs, onions, and a tangy ketchup glaze. Meatloaf wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable. It stretched a pound of meat into a full meal, making it economical for large families. Leftovers became sandwiches for school lunches, ensuring nothing went to waste. In many homes, Meatloaf Monday became a tradition, setting the tone for the week. Its enduring popularity comes from its adaptability. Whether topped with bacon, stuffed with cheese, or kept plain and simple, it was always welcomed at the table. Families would gather around with mashed potatoes and peas on the side, turning the start of the week into something warm and comforting. The ritual of meatloaf also reflected family life in the 1960s, when dinners were more than food, they were a chance to reconnect after school and work. Mothers often prided themselves on perfecting the loaf, experimenting with seasonings or glazes, while fathers carved generous slices for eager kids. Meatloaf was dependable, nourishing, and deeply American. It carried with it a sense of stability, a comfort that reminded families that no matter how hectic life became, some things never changed. 2. Tuna noodle casserole. Few dishes capture the convenience-driven 1960s like tuna noodle casserole. Canned tuna, condensed cream of mushroom soup, and egg noodles came together in a single dish topped with breadcrumbs or crushed potato chips. It was budget-friendly, easy to prepare, and could feed a crowd. Housewives loved it because it saved time, and kids loved it because it was warm, creamy, and comforting. This casserole symbolized the growing reliance on processed foods, reflecting a decade where supermarkets were bursting with canned goods and frozen vegetables. It was the taste of practicality, and almost every family had it at least once a week. It wasn't fancy, but it was dependable, the kind of meal that brought everyone to the table without complaints. For many families, tuna noodle casserole was more than a quick fix, it became a midweek ritual. The crunchy topping added just enough excitement to keep kids from complaining, while the creamy sauce wrapped the dish in pure nostalgia. Cooks often swapped in frozen peas or carrots to sneak in vegetables, making it both convenient and filling. It also traveled well for potlucks and church suppers, cementing its place in community gatherings. In its own way, tuna noodle casserole represented the optimism of the era: simple, affordable, and always ready to bring people together around the table. 3. TV dinners. The rise of television reshaped American culture, and with it came the TV dinner. Packaged in foil trays with compartments for meat, vegetables, and dessert, these frozen meals were marketed as futuristic marvels. For busy parents or nights when cooking felt like a chore, popping a TV dinner in the oven was revolutionary. Swanson became a household name, and children delighted in the novelty of eating dinner in front of their favorite shows. While critics argued about nutrition and quality, families embraced the convenience. The TV dinner was not just a meal, it was a cultural experience, representing the blending of modern technology and everyday life. Eating Salisbury steak while watching The Ed Sullivan Show felt like progress itself. For kids, the magic lay in the packaging. Every compartment had its own little surprise, from creamy mashed potatoes to gooey brownies. For parents, it meant reclaiming precious time, a luxury in an era where families were busier than ever. Even though homemade meals still dominated, TV dinners gave families a taste of modern living, and for many children of the 1960s, they remain a vivid memory. They weren't just food, they were a sign that the future had arrived, and it came wrapped in foil. 4. Sloppy Joes. Messy, saucy, and utterly satisfying, Sloppy Joes were a staple of weeknight dinners. Ground beef simmered in tomato-based sauce and piled onto hamburger buns created a meal that was both affordable and kid-friendly. Served with potato chips or pickles, Sloppy Joes brought laughter and a sense of fun to the dinner table. For parents, they were easy to prepare and required few ingredients. For kids, they were a delight, a meal that broke the rules of neatness. Sloppy Joes thrived in the 1960s because they balanced flavor, affordability, and simplicity, cementing their place as a beloved comfort food. The charm of Sloppy Joes was that they felt indulgent without being complicated. Moms could whip up a big batch in under 30 minutes, feeding everyone without stretching the budget. They were also highly adaptable. Some families spiced up the sauce with Worcestershire, mustard, or even a hint of chili powder, while others kept it mild for younger palates. And because they were so portable, Sloppy Joes often showed up at school lunches, picnics, and church socials. In an age defined by family gatherings and neighborhood block parties, Sloppy Joes became the unofficial sandwich of togetherness, messy hands, big smiles, and happy memories guaranteed. 5. Chicken a la King. If meatloaf was humble, chicken a la King was elegant, or at least it felt that way in the 1960s. This creamy dish of diced chicken, mushrooms, and green peppers served over rice or toast points was considered sophisticated home cooking. It appeared at dinner parties and Sunday meals, offering a break from the routine of casseroles. Housewives liked that it sounded fancy. While still using affordable ingredients, often relying on canned vegetables and condensed soup. Chicken a la King represented aspiration, a taste of refinement in the comfort of one's own kitchen. Part of its charm was its versatility. Some families served it with biscuits, others spooned it over pasta, making it adaptable to what was in the pantry. Its creamy richness made it feel indulgent, a far cry from the meat and potatoes dinners of the week. Chicken a la King was also a company dish, something a homemaker could proudly serve to guests without spending all day in the kitchen. It symbolized the blending of practicality and ambition, offering middle-class families a sense of culinary sophistication. In many ways, it was a bridge between everyday cooking and the gourmet trends that would explode in later decades. 6. Spaghetti and meatballs. Italian-American cuisine had been embraced by the mainstream long before the 1960s, but it was during this decade that spaghetti and meatballs became a weekly tradition for countless families. Often made with jarred tomato sauce and a mix of beef and pork for the meatballs, this dish was hearty and filling. It appealed to children and adults alike, offering leftovers that reheated beautifully. For many immigrant families, it was also a point of pride, a way to share their culinary heritage in a country still learning to love pasta. Red checkered tablecloths and garlic bread made the meal complete, solidifying its status as a cultural favorite. 7. Salisbury steak. Modeled after hamburgers but dressed up with brown gravy and onions, Salisbury steak was another economical dish that satisfied families. It offered the familiarity of beef patties with a touch of refinement, served alongside mashed potatoes or vegetables. Its origins stretched back to the early 20th century, but by the 1960s, it was a fixture in both home kitchens and frozen dinners. It was hearty, reliable, and always met expectations. Salisbury steak may not have been glamorous, but it was deeply loved, embodying the era's preference for meals that blended practicality with comfort. 8. Jell-O molds. No discussion of 1960s food would be complete without Jell-O. From salads to desserts, Jell-O molds became culinary canvases for creative homemakers. Brightly colored gelatin was combined with fruit, marshmallows, or even vegetables, and presented at family gatherings or potlucks. These wobbly creations were as much about visual spectacle as taste, embodying the playfulness of mid-century cooking. While today some Jell-O salads may seem strange, in the 1960s they were a mark of hospitality and domestic pride. They brought color and whimsy to the table, and children adored them. 9. Ham and pineapple. The influence of tiki culture swept through the 1960s, and nowhere was it more evident than in the popularity of ham paired with pineapple. The sweet and savory combination reflected the decade's fascination with Hawaiian-inspired flavors, especially after Hawaii became a U.S. state in 1959. Baked ham topped with pineapple rings and cherries often graced Sunday dinner tables, while ham steak with pineapple became a quicker weeknight option. It was festive, colorful, and felt exotic at a time when Americans were expanding their culinary horizons. This dish symbolized a playful curiosity with global flavors while still being grounded in familiar ingredients. 10. Breakfast for dinner: pancakes, bacon, and eggs. In the 1960s, breakfast wasn't just for mornings. Many families enjoyed breakfast for dinner nights, a tradition that made mealtimes feel both fun and indulgent. Pancakes sizzling on a griddle filled the kitchen with the sweet smell of butter and syrup, while bacon crackled in the pan and eggs fried sunny side up. For parents, it was an easy meal to prepare; for kids, it was like a treat. This tradition reflected the growing flexibility of American households, a willingness to bend rules in favor of joy and convenience. Breakfast for dinner nights broke up the monotony of weekly meal plans, proving that comfort food wasn't tied to any particular hour. 11. Chili con carne. Spicy, hearty, and endlessly adaptable, chili con carne was another staple of 1960s kitchens. Families often made it in large pots, letting the beef, beans, tomatoes, and spices simmer until the flavors blended together. For some, it was a Friday night dish paired with cornbread or crackers. For others, it became the centerpiece of informal gatherings, with everyone ladling bowls straight from the pot. Chili reflected a growing interest in regional and southwestern cooking, showcasing America's culinary diversity while still being affordable. It could stretch to feed a crowd, and leftovers often tasted even better the next day. 12. Pot roast with vegetables. If Sunday had a signature dish, it was pot roast. This meal required patience, simmering slowly in the oven or on the stove until the beef became tender and flavorful. Surrounded by carrots, potatoes, and onions, pot roast filled the home with aromas that promised comfort and warmth. For many families, it was the highlight of the week, a time to sit down together after church, share stories, and enjoy a meal that felt celebratory yet humble. Pot roast symbolized tradition, embodying the values of patience, family, and nourishment. In an age of convenience foods, it reminded people that some meals were worth waiting for. 13. Cabbage rolls. Cabbage rolls brought old-world flavors into mid-century American kitchens. Made by stuffing cabbage leaves with seasoned ground beef, rice, and tomato sauce, this dish carried Eastern European roots but became popular across the U.S. in the 1960s. It was inexpensive, filling, and adaptable, with variations depending on family heritage. For immigrant families, cabbage rolls preserved cultural identity while also fitting neatly into American cooking traditions. Their popularity reflected how the 1960s dinner table was a blend of heritage and assimilation, honoring the past while embracing the present. 14. Macaroni and cheese. While mac and cheese has roots that go back centuries, in the 1960s it achieved superstar status. The boxed version, introduced by Kraft decades earlier, had become a pantry staple, turning a simple combination of pasta and cheese sauce into a weekly go-to meal. It was quick, affordable, and universally loved by children. Homemade baked versions with breadcrumbs also thrived, often served at potlucks or family gatherings. Macaroni and cheese was the quintessential comfort food, bridging the gap between childhood indulgence and adult satisfaction. Its popularity was a testament to America's growing love of convenience mixed with timeless flavor. 15. Hot dogs and beans. Few meals were as iconic to the 1960s as hot dogs and baked beans. Affordable, easy, and kid-friendly, this pairing was often served on weeknights when parents wanted a no-fuss dinner. Hot dogs could be boiled, grilled, or fried, while canned baked beans offered instant sweetness and heartiness. It was the kind of meal that symbolized summer barbecues but was just as common around the kitchen table in colder months. For children, it was pure joy. For parents, it was reliable and budget-friendly. Hot dogs and beans represented the simplicity of family life, proving that comfort didn't require complexity. 16. Chicken pot pie. Golden, flaky crust on the outside, creamy chicken and vegetables on the inside, chicken pot pie was a 1960s classic that warmed the soul. Sometimes homemade, sometimes frozen, it was the epitome of comfort food. Families loved its balance, rich but not overwhelming, hearty but not heavy. For many, it became a staple winter dish, served with peas or a side salad. The frozen versions that became popular in the 1960s made chicken pot pie accessible to busy families, ensuring it remained a weekly favorite. More than just a meal, it felt like a small celebration each time it came out of the oven. 17. Goulash. American goulash, elbow macaroni, ground beef, tomatoes, and seasonings, was the kind of one-pot meal that defined the 1960s kitchen. It was hearty, affordable, and easy to stretch for large families. Though its roots traced back to Hungarian cuisine, the American version became a standard in school cafeterias and home kitchens alike. For many children, goulash was synonymous with comfort, the kind of meal that filled bellies without breaking budgets. It was another example of how immigrant traditions influenced the broader American table, creating new classics along the way. 18. Deviled eggs. No family gathering in the 1960s was complete without deviled eggs. These bite-sized appetizers, hard-boiled eggs halved and filled with creamy yolk mixture seasoned with mustard and paprika, became party staples. They were inexpensive to make, easy to prepare ahead, and universally appealing. Deviled eggs represented the social side of 1960s food culture, a time when potlucks, picnics, and neighborhood gatherings thrived. Their popularity wasn't just about flavor, but also about community. They were finger food that encouraged sharing, laughter, and connection. 19. Baked ziti. Another Italian-American favorite, baked ziti emerged as a comfort food powerhouse in the 1960s. With layers of pasta, tomato sauce, cheese, and sometimes sausage or ground beef, baked ziti was hearty enough to feed a crowd and adaptable to whatever ingredients were on hand. It became especially popular at family reunions, church suppers, and community events. Like spaghetti and meatballs, it highlighted the growing influence of Italian flavors in mainstream American cooking. Each bubbling casserole dish of baked ziti carried with it the warmth of togetherness, cementing its place as a weekly favorite in countless homes. 20. Pork chops with applesauce. Made famous in part by pop culture references of the time, pork chops with applesauce became an unexpectedly trendy dish in the 1960s. The sweet and savory pairing worked beautifully, balancing hearty meat with refreshing fruit. Families loved it because it felt a little different while still being simple to prepare. Pork chops could be pan-fried or baked, and applesauce was often store-bought, making it a quick weeknight option. This dish symbolized the willingness of 1960s families to embrace playful combinations, reflecting a decade that was just beginning to experiment with flavor contrasts. 21. Baked Alaska. Dessert in the 1960s wasn't always simple, and nothing proved that more than baked Alaska. With its layers of cake and ice cream topped with toasted meringue, it looked like something out of a high-end restaurant. Yet, surprisingly, many home cooks attempted it, eager to wow their families and guests. Baked Alaska became a symbol of ambition, a dessert that blended showmanship with nostalgia. It reminded families that food was not only for nourishment but also for delight, spectacle, and memory-making. 22. Apple pie. No matter how much American cuisine evolved, apple pie remained a centerpiece of the 1960s dinner table. Whether homemade or store-bought, it was considered the quintessential dessert, served with ice cream or a slice of cheddar cheese. Apple pie symbolized tradition, patriotism, and comfort, embodying the idea of home in every bite. For many families, Sunday dinner didn't feel complete without it. Even as new trends emerged, apple pie reminded Americans of their roots, offering continuity in a rapidly changing decade. 23. Icebox cake. Finally, one of the sweetest symbols of 1960s convenience was the icebox cake. Made by layering graham crackers or wafers with whipped cream or pudding and letting it set in the refrigerator, this no-bake dessert became a staple in households that embraced modern appliances. It was easy, affordable, and required no special equipment. Icebox cakes reflected the decade's fascination with refrigeration and time-saving methods. They also represented creativity, as families experimented with flavors and decorations. For children, it was magic, a cake made without an oven. For parents, it was practicality at its finest. 24. Beef stroganoff. In the 1960s, beef stroganoff made its way from Eastern Europe into mainstream American kitchens, and it quickly became a beloved weeknight staple. Families would slice strips of beef, sauté them with mushrooms and onions, then smother everything in a creamy sour cream sauce. Served over egg noodles or rice, it was hearty, filling, and just exotic enough to feel sophisticated without being intimidating. For many homemakers, beef stroganoff struck the perfect balance between comfort and refinement, especially when hosting dinner guests. Convenience also played a role in its popularity. Many recipes leaned on canned mushrooms or condensed soup, making preparation quicker. At the same time, the dish represented America's curiosity about international flavors, blending them seamlessly into everyday life. By the end of the decade, beef stroganoff wasn't just a trendy dish, it was a weekly tradition in countless homes, one that warmed both the stomach and the spirit. 25. Fried chicken Sundays. If pot roast was the signature of some households, fried chicken was the crown jewel of others, especially on Sundays. Families would gather around the table to enjoy golden brown chicken, perfectly seasoned and fried to a crispy finish. Served with mashed potatoes, green beans, or corn on the cob, it was a meal that felt like both a reward and a ritual. Mothers often guarded their frying techniques, the right oil temperature, the secret spice blend in the flour, as if they were family heirlooms. Children remembered the sound of sizzling chicken in cast iron skillets, the aroma that filled the home, and the anticipation of that first crunchy bite. Fried chicken symbolized comfort and celebration, bridging the gap between everyday cooking and Sunday feasts. In the 1960s, before fast food chains dominated, homemade fried chicken was a point of pride, a dish that spoke to tradition, love, and the joy of gathering together. A feast of memories. The meals of the 1960s were more than recipes, they were reflections of a society balancing tradition and change. Families leaned on casseroles, pot roasts, and Jell-O molds not just to feed themselves, but to create moments of togetherness. These dishes told stories of immigrant heritage, technological progress, and cultural curiosity. They were the glue that held households together in an era of upheaval. As we look back at these 25 classic meals, we realize they are more than nostalgia. They are reminders of resilience, creativity, and the enduring importance of gathering around a table. The tastes may evolve, but the memories never fade. Relive the tradition. Now it's your turn. Which of these meals do you remember most vividly? Which ones did your family serve weekly? Take a moment to share your memories with those you love, maybe even recreate a dish or two. Because in every bite of meatloaf, every spoonful of chili, and every slice of apple pie, there's a story waiting to be told again.